The Rationale for Michel de Montaigne's Literary Techniques by Jean Vespasian. It is easier to understand someone's actions if we know his motivation. The same applies to understanding his philosophy and literary style, especially when it incorporates innovations, controversy, or unorthodox features. Historians have written extensively about the literary style of Michel de Montaigne, 1533 to 1592. But their conclusions are rather unconnected and disorganized. Literary critics point out that Montaigne loved to recount anecdotes, ask rhetorical questions, employ humor and irony, quote authors from antiquity, and go on lengthy tangents. Those remarks are true, but why did Montaigne write like that? What is the rationale for his style? I can answer that question by using one word: self-reliance. Montaigne's strong self-reliance shows in his literary style. It shapes every one of his essays, every aspect of his logic, every anecdote he recounts. Let me illustrate my argument with Montaigne's essay titled On Prognostications. The key idea of the essay is that no one can predict our future with precision, and that we will do better if we rely on our own efforts to give direction to our life. Michel de Montaigne's essay on prognostications. If Montaigne had stated his thesis in a couple of sentences, his arguments would have lost persuasiveness and strength. Let us not forget that he was writing primarily for himself. His goal was to cover the subject matter thoroughly and arrive at a solid conclusion. Self-reliance preceded Montaigne's literary activity. It was a key trait of his personality, a trait that was also present in his best friend, Étienne de la Boétie, 1530 to 1563. Montaigne's essays constitute a philosophical journey where the author is driven by his self-reliance. It provides him with a point of view by default and protects him against intolerance. Self-reliance makes Montaigne's essays stand apart from all other 16th-century works. It explains every characteristic of his literary style, method, and logic. I regard the essay on prognostications as an archetype of Montaigne's literary style. It contains all stylistic features that historians have identified in Montaigne's works, namely, the use of anecdotes from antiquity, rhetorical questions, humor and irony, and a few tangents. Let me explain how those style elements emanate from the author's strong self-reliance. Michel de Montaigne's use of historical anecdotes. Montaigne recounts several anecdotes in this essay. The best known refers to the Roman Emperor Augustus, 63 BC, 14 AD. The imperial astrologer had once predicted that Augustus was going to die on his birthday. As a result, Augustus became so frightened that, during the ensuing years, he spent his birthdays in bed, afraid to do anything or go anywhere. The little story makes Augustus look like a fool and drives Montaigne's point home. Before recounting the anecdote, the conclusion was all clear in Montaigne's mind, but he wanted to add weight to the argument. Montaigne's use of anecdotes comes to the same conclusion over and over. It doesn't matter whether Montaigne is drawing the anecdotes from Cicero, 106 to 43 BC, Plutarch, 46 to 120 AD, or Julius Caesar, 100 to 44 BC, because he is unusually selecting stories that speak for self-reliance. Why was Montaigne employing anecdotes from antiquity? Because he mostly had books by ancient authors in his library. He was using the sources he had available. If he had lived in a monastery, he might have quoted the Bible or some theological treatise. Michel de Montaigne's use of rhetorical questions. Montaigne's strong self-reliance also shows in his rhetorical questions. In the 16th century, it was fairly risky to attack the dominant opinions. Montaigne exercises critical thinking in a clear way. He refrains from direct attacks, but uses rhetorical questions to express his disagreement. In his essay on prognostications, he attacks everyone that claims to be clairvoyant about the future. Montaigne points out that what is the point of predicting the future if we cannot even make the right decisions in the present? Montaigne also employs humor or irony with the objective of calling for self-reliance. He writes that it is foolish to try to read our future in the stars when we are often unable to notice important clues here and now, right before our eyes. Even the tangential subjects addressed by Montaigne aim at reinforcing his call for self-reliance. The digression contained in On Prognostications jumps from astrology to vanity and rates prognostications as vain attempts to reassure ourselves of our future success. Montaigne's self-reliance is the essential philosophical trait that explains his literary style. Let us learn the lesson and place on our own efforts more trust than on the movements of stars in heaven. If you are interested in putting rational ideas into practice in all sorts of situations, I recommend my book, Against All Odds: How to Achieve Great Victories in Desperate Times. For more information, go to johnvespasian.com.